So maybe then,
Well,
yeah, start where you like then, or go ahead.
I, we knew that we had to get out, and especially Eric and I. Uh, there was very little chance for our grandmother and my mother to get out. Of course, like same as Susie's parents, I mean, there was little chance. But Eric got the job in Brussels.
Right. He managed to get that fairly easily, right? Or he had to look
Easily.
around a lot.
He applied, it was advertised, I think. He applied and he got it. And I actually didn't do much. I
Oh, didn't do much towards
to
leaving?
get out. I registered with a few, with the organization, the Jewish organization in Vienna,
Right.
who looked after all the Jews. And one day they phoned and said, I can get on a transport to Kitchener Camp. And of course I said, sure, I'll go. That was about 2 weeks before the war.
Maybe can you set the scene for me, Kurt, a little bit about what was happening in Vienna at that time? Like, could you go out? Were you
Well,
confined
you
to?
could always go out. There was always the danger of that you might get arrested or you might be stopped by some of those Nazi guards, SS.
They were roaming the streets all the time.
There was always some occasion that they were around. Sometimes they sort of rounded up Jews they wanted to move something, do some work or something. It was just sometimes just to be nasty, really.
Were you scared? Like, do you remember your feeling at that time, or?
There's one thing, you can't be scared all the time.
Yeah.
If you live in a surrounding for, it was over a year or something, and you came in 38, in March, I think 38 was Austria joined Germany. It was pretty rough, you were careful, but you can't run around scared.
Every day, all the
You
time.
have to do things. You couldn't work, so you tried, if you had a chance, to do something to make a few bucks.
Were you working at all at that time, or not really?
I was working before Hitler came,
You were.
but when Hitler came, they prohibited Jews from being employed. So that, of course, put a crimp into the whole thing.
Even though the man you
big
worked
fight.
for was quite.
Well, there was no choice. You
No.
couldn't employ Jews. That was the law.
Yeah.
And I occasionally picked up work by repairing a radio. I think I wired up a house electrically for somebody in the country, a little bit outside Vienna.
So you found little jobs,
But you could. It wasn't a steady income,
yeah.
and it was pretty hard financially. But
Who was living in your house at that time? Was it
What?
who was living in your home at that time? Was it your mom?
well, there was my grandmother, my mother, my sister, Eric, and I.
And you were all in the house.
All of this house at that point. Then, of course, my sister passed away, and then Eric left, and then we were just the three of us, my mother, grandmother, and I.
How was your mother doing at that time?
Not all that great.
Just from the fear and the.
Yeah, there
She knew you were going to have to go too,
were a
right?
few things. First of all, that my sister
That
died
died.
was tremendous. That really got, she was in a terrible shape after that.
Well, that must have
Then
affected.
Eric left, which she was glad that he was gone, but she still
Yeah.
you missed that there was somebody missing. And after I went, I think it must have been pretty grim. But I couldn't have helped if I stayed. There was nothing I could do.
Well, she would have known
Yeah.
it made sense for you to
They
go.
wouldn't have then. Well, they all insisted if you can go, go.
Yeah.
But I don't know when they were picked up exactly for the when they died in the camp.
You did keep in touch a little bit after you left, though.
Well, there were a few weeks we could correspond.
By letters you
By
would have
letter.
written.
Yeah.
Was she able to stay in her house, though, for quite...
Until she was arrested.
Until she was arrested. Yeah. She, did your grandmother live on, like, right to that point as well?
Yeah, my grandmother was in Theresienstadt.
Oh, she didn't, and so they didn't end up in the same camp together then? You don't know?
I only know about my grandmother. Theresienstadt is the only concentration camp where there was an exact record of every person who came in and went out.
Oh.
When they died. There's a book on this.
And her name is there?
Her name is there, and I know she died in December 42.
Oh, that's amazing.
Actually, they're not quite sure, either on the 20th or the 21st.
December.
December 42 she died. So at this point she must have been in her middle 90s.
Oh, she really lived quite long.
Yeah.
Well, your mom probably was evacuated, sent to a different camp.
She most probably went to Dachau or Buchenwald.
Yeah.
And most probably never survived very long.
No. Well, she would have been all by herself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So So you actually were, you had a couple of encounters that were a little bit harrowing before you were evacuated.
Yeah, but that's nothing. You know, I'll tell you something. I read the other day Wiesel. You know Wiesel?
Oh, sure.
His write-up, and he and his father went to the concentration camp. From that day till the Americans showed up on Freedom. That's a few years. And anybody who says that they had any hardship when they got out, that includes your mother with the children transport, or myself with the camp, Eric, you can look at it as a vacation. If you read what these people went through every day,
Yeah.
some of it totally only to annoy them and to make them suffer. And some of the things they had to do made no sense whatsoever.
And for
But
years,
for
like for a
years,
long period of
and
time.
They let him freeze, stand outside and let him freeze, and all sorts of things. They didn't give him enough to eat, of course. There was just a bowl of soup and the bread once a day.
It was
So-
terrible hardship.
So if anybody tells me they had a hardship in Shanghai or in England or in wherever, I tell them they're nuts, because they were on a vacation compared to what they could have
Absolutely.
been.
Well, and they lived.
It was an inconvenience to be interned, that's for sure, but it wasn't, I know nobody's going to kill me. I get enough food.
Yeah.
I can see a doctor if I'm sick. So the alternatives are so tremendous
Yeah.
that anybody who is always suffering, they just want to show off and think that they suffer too, as if it would be something to be glorified.
Right. Like, don't say you
but
suffered, I suffered.
So we didn't have enough to eat on the Isle of Man eventually. Big deal. These guys did starved for 3 or 5 years, 4 years. So I starved for 2 months before I went to Canada.
And you
I had
also,
too much to eat.
well, and you knew you didn't have the threat of
So,
death hanging
you know,
over your head.
It's all very relative.
Yeah.
So
Did you have any idea, Kurt, like you were 2 weeks before the war, you were evacuated to Kitchener Camp.
yeah.
And did you know where that was, or had you any idea where
I
you
had
were?
no idea where Kitchener Camp was. I could find England on the map, but when you ask me where Kent is or where, I had no idea.
Where was that? Was that on the Isle of Man?
In Kent, no, the Kitchener Camp was in Kent.
It was in Kent.
It was between Dover and Calais, the two ports. But it was a nice area. I went swimming in the channel
Really?
and with a friend of mine.
Pretty cold.
And as a matter of fact, we went across the golf course. Of course, nobody played golf. It was during the war. And I saw a few years ago they had the British Open on the same golf course where I could walk there every year to go swimming in summer.
That's funny. What was that golf course? Do you remember?
Beautiful. I don't remember the name.
It was in Kent, though.
In Kent. So I saw my old walkway.
So when you got there, what was that like? Was it?
Kitchener Camp was relatively easy. There was no, we did a little bit of work sometimes, and during the war we had a listening post for the British Navy.
Could you have entered the British services at that time? Was that something
Yes,
that you thought
could
about?
have, like Eva's parent, Eva's father was in he joined there was a special unit of refugees. I didn't really want to, I would have gone if it would have been the regular army maybe, but
Yeah.
just
Would you have been on the reserves, or what would
these
they?
people did just work.
Oh.
Not,
Was that because they were Germans, or just
they were
because
Germans and Austrians, and they didn't sort of.
totally trust you?
There was one group which later on became a really active. There were 50 people who were trained for spy translation and so interrogating German prisoners, and they really had a hard time. They were at the forefront of all the armies to investigate problems and find out whom the army faces and so on. Anyhow, there were 50 people. I read a book about it, and at the end of the war there were 4 left.
Really?
So they had a really tough
Rough
time.
war.
But they volunteered for that.
Were you quite free to choose what you were going to do? Like, could you have gone to work, or were you really confined? You had to stay there.
Compound.
You
You
were.
weren't locked up. You could walk out and you could come back, and but you had to be there in the evening.
Slept there,
Yeah,
and all
just
your
like
meals
that,
were
yeah.
there. Did you speak English at that time, Kurt, or were you
Very
learning it?
little, because we spoke mostly German.
And you were with other
But you
Austrians.
could get, well, the people that I came with were all Austrians.
Yeah.
But there were Germans as well as. You could get, we could go away, like I went 1 week to London. I had a friend in London who came from Vienna straight. He didn't go to the camp, he had a British entry visa.
Oh,
I visited him for a week. I could get that permission that they know where you are. And,
Right.
but you had to
Stay pretty close.
You had to be pretty close.
Were you corresponding with Eric at that time? Were you writing back and forth?
With Eric, not as much. We corresponded through our mother.
Oh, she was.
At that time, in the beginning, we could still write to each other. So Eric wrote home and I wrote home, and then she wrote to both of us. But later on, once we were interned, it stopped.
So you didn't know what had happened with him or where he was or anything?
I know where he was.
You knew he was in Brussels?
Yeah, because we met when we went through Brussels. He actually took the train from Brussels to the Ostend, I think.
That was where you took the boat at the end?
I took the boat to England and he went back to Brussels.
Oh, you met up at that point?
We met up on this.
Was that an coincidence or you planned
No, we
it?
planned. That was planned. We knew when our train gets through Brussels and he took off.
Oh, this was when you just arrived?
Then when I left, that was when I left. After that we lost contact. I had no idea where he was once the voyage started in Brussels, in Belgium.
Because he didn't stay in Brussels, like he moved around a fair amount, didn't he?
He stayed in Brussels.
Did he throughout the whole war?
No. He
Just
was interned with me. He went, after the Germans invaded, he went from Brussels, eventually got to the border, he went to England, got interned in England, immediately with a German passport. Was on the Isle of Man, we were both on the Isle of Man, in different camps. We didn't know that at the time, when we met on the boat to Canada,
So did
to Liverpool.
Did you stay in the same camp though for most of the war, or you moved?
In Canada, yes.
Oh, I see. So you.
Only in Canada.
When did you actually come to Canada then? It was still wartime.
Oh, sure.
43? 40. Oh, so you didn't stay at Kitchener Camp for that long?
No, a couple of, maybe 3/4 of a year.
Oh, and at that time were you actively working on getting out? Like, no, they just moved you.
Yeah, they just shipped us off. Kitchener Camp was supposed to be a transit camp, but very few people really had a chance to get anywhere.
So
They knew that.
Do you mean to get anywhere?
Yeah.
Could you have conceivably stayed there the whole war?
Well, you couldn't because you were interned. Eventually, they were shipped to Canada or Australia. So you couldn't stay there. You had no choice. I mean,
You couldn't say, I
the
want to.
government is either you joined the army or you were shipped out.
Oh, I see. So you couldn't say, I want to stay in England.
No.
Without
No,
if you joined the service, you could have stayed.
You should have stayed.
Oh, did Eric consider doing that? Did he?
He had no chance because he wasn't in camp. He was arrested on arrival in England, put in the jail, and eventually sent to Isle of Man and was shipped to Canada.
So there was no such thing then, Kurt, as being considered a refugee. That that you were on the run from the Germans. Like, did they not, like, for them to arrest you?
This is too vague. They didn't know, especially after France fell. They didn't know who was the fifth colonist. And, I mean, the Germans can send out 50 people with Jewish passports.
So they had to really just
So
take
they
no
had chance to
Germans or
know
Austrians.
who was really Jewish and who was.
But
And
England certainly knew the Jews were
there
having to
were
leave.
only Jews, by the way, in Canada.
Yeah, it was a
There
lot.
were all others. There were a majority were Jewish, of course, but there were people which were known, which were sort of ex-royalty of Germany.
Anybody who had to leave was there.
Yeah.
Did you have, did you form any friendships there? Did you get to know people enough that you know, stay in touch with them, or?
Yeah, on and off I stayed in touch with quite a few.
You did,
Some
eh?
of my friends.
From
Yeah.
Kitchener Camp,
Yeah, not so much Kitchener Camp as internment camp.
Here in Canada.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about, did you have any idea, even in that 3/4 of a year you were in England, of what was happening in Austria and Germany?
Only through the radio,
But the
the
news,
BBC.
and what were they saying? That they had no idea about the concentration camps?
If they had, they didn't say it. We know there were camps, we didn't know to what extent. Nobody expected that they had a gas chamber. That was very well secret.
But they knew
But
that,
it wasn't that much of a secret, actually. The Jewish organization knew about it. They once asked Roosevelt to bomb the railway, which brings the Jews to the camps. And he didn't go for it. It's too risky, it's too far. And they didn't do it. So there was really nothing, but they knew about the camps. The camps were known.
a lot of lost chances there for
Yeah.
destroying.
But nobody cared. There was nobody
Yeah.
who really.
Did you feel, you know, now I know you say that it was an inconvenience, but that's about all. Like it wasn't anything like what other people were going through. Do you remember thinking that at that time, that I'm pretty lucky, I'm here?
Oh, I always thought so.
You did, eh?
I always thought so. There was no. I
No.
had friends who were in concentration camp, but they came out. At one time, if you were in there, and if you had a visa, they let you go get out of the concentration camp if there was nothing wrong with you. And
This was before the war.
I had some friends who were in there. They got visas to all sorts of South American countries, and they got out. But their description wasn't too good of the camp.
So even before you went to the camp, you knew what those
knew
camps
that
were
they
like.
Existed.
Yeah. So you always had a feeling that,
It is a possibility that they went up there.
yeah.
But you wouldn't worry about it. You can't help it. If it happens, it happens.
Yeah. When you were in England, what were you thinking was going to be the next step for you? Like, you knew you had to go. Did you have any sense of where you wanted to go?
Not really. Actually, for us, the next step was when the war ends, what will happen? You'll make your decisions, and you couldn't really plan that much because there was too much you didn't know. Did England let you stay, or do you have to go back to Austria, or do you, if Hitler loses, of course. If Hitler wins, then the whole thing is gone anyway. So you didn't really have a long range.
You probably at that time would have thought that you would go back to Austria. Wouldn't that have been your natural?
I don't particularly fancy that idea.
You didn't even then? No. Based on what you saw happening and...
The way they behaved against the Jews, you figured they're not going to change overnight and become our best friends.
Must have been, certainly for people like my grandfather, must have been a very awful feeling knowing that you'd fought for the Germans in the First World War. You know, you were very loyal to the Germans,
Well,
and then they turn on you.
Yeah, well, My father was in the war, in the First World War.
He did.
But that didn't count.
But what a feeling of betrayal that must have been.
Yeah, but that's the way it is. It's,
You couldn't really question what.
yeah, it's but I guess elderly people at that point were even in a worse spot than we were, because we did have chances to get out, and we had more strength to withstand more of that torture than.
Well, you were young. You were still only about
Yeah.
20, weren't you? You were
Yeah,
20.
early 20s.
You just knew you'd have a life, like you.
Yeah. Well, we didn't know for how long, but you could take whatever came, as long
Yeah.
within limits.
Yeah.
So from then on, the story was simple. We went to Kitchener Camp, then to England. I mean, to Canada.
When you got to Canada, where? Well, maybe tell me about encountering Eric on the boat. Had you been apart for quite a long time at that point?
Maybe a year and a half.
So and then did he see you or you saw him or what?
No. We were on the boat and Eric was listening, was talking to some of the guys, and where are you from? So one says, we're from Kitchener Camp. So Eric said, well, I have a brother in Kitchener Camp. Do you know him? And they said, oh, he's right on the boat with us. He told him where I was. Then Eric came down and we saw each other.
That must have been a funny moment.
It was a funny moment, yeah.
Because were there a lot of boats coming and going at that time?
No.
No.
Not really.
Do you remember what year and month that was that you took the boat? You said 40.
Was in 40. March,
Yeah,
do you know when I came to Canada? What month?
July
July.
July
So it
40?
was-
40.
Yeah,
We found
So it
the
was-
date the other day.
yeah, that's what I know. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So July 40, it was around July. Amen.
So then you knew you'd probably stay together.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So where did the boat land? Did it come to Montreal?
No, Quebec.
Quebec.
We stayed on the Plains of Abraham. There was a camp. We stayed there for a while, and then we went to Sherbrooke.
So there you were immersed in English for a while in England, and then now all of a sudden you're immersed
Well,
in...
I wasn't much into I was in a camp which was spoke
Oh,
all German.
Right. So you must have spoken English at that point,
A
though.
little bit.
Little
I
bit.
picked up a little bit, but mainly I picked it up in Canada.
But there you were in Quebec, where it must have been all French.
Mm. Then we had a lot of people who spoke English
English.
in camp, and we started to speak, to try to learn English.
There must have been a whole... were there mostly Germans and Austrians on the boat coming over?
And German prisoners, German soldiers.
Oh,
They-
German soldiers. Arrested German soldiers.
Yeah, prisoners of war.
And they were being sent to Canada?
Yeah.
What was Canada going to do with them?
Yeah, they were interned in Canada, but
Oh.
not with us. They were interned separate.
You weren't arrested when you got to Canada, though. It wasn't like
Yeah,
that.
sure.
Oh, really, you were?
Well, we were never free.
Yeah, you had to stay in the...
We were taken from the boat to the camp. There were guard towers and you couldn't go out. And then you couldn't go out anymore.
You had to stay in the
That
camp.
you had to stay
Oh, it was
inside.
even more restrictive than than Kitchener had
Well,
been.
Kitchener Camp wasn't restrictive in a sense. There were no guards or anything. But here there were guards with machine guns on the tower. To
Oh,
make sure
really?
that and they had a uniform.
Did you feel that that was, well, it was the way it was?
Well, that's the way it was, and they don't know who we are and what we are, so it's understandable.
You must have had a greater sense there of optimism, that you'd arrived in a place that,
Well, we figured at least we are safe.
yeah.
Germans won't bomb us. And of course, the nice thing was we had plenty of food.
Oh, there was more food in Canada than in
Oh.
England.
Canada gave you plenty of food.
Oh, so that was a great thing, that,
It was a nice relief to eat as much as you want.
do you remember feeling a sense of boredom, that you wished you could work, you wanted to be doing
Well,
more?
We did some work. There was some war work we did to get paid 30 cents a day, I think it was. Big salary. And
Not minimum wage.
they made nets for camouflage or something. And then eventually we had a radio station, a listening station on the radio. And there was sort of a few other things we did. We did work and we could get
You get paid for the
paid
work.
for 30 cents a day.
Yeah,
Of course you got your food, your meal, your sleep, your everything.
that was provided for free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in Germany you can't charge them.
Were you called upon to use your skills?
Well, I used it in the listening post.
You did, eh?
And sold. And look after the recordings, as the equipment works. I worked as a technician practically.
They couldn't have had too many people with your...
Oh, there were a few.
There were a
There
few?
were a few which were professional, which worked in radio,
Did...
technical. The technical end of radio, not the broadcast.
Yeah. Sort of making it work and
Yeah.
maintaining it. And
See,
did you find that it was the same stuff as you'd worked on before? That it
oh
was...
yeah, that was
You
no
could pick it up.
That was no problem.
What was Eric doing? What would be his... Because he would have done...
Actually, he was an accountant. Bookkeeping, basically.
Yeah.
And he worked, I guess, I don't remember, I think he worked in the office, did some work in the accounting, I don't know really
Yeah.
what.
So this was still wartime when
Still
you were
war,
in Quebec, and you stayed in Sherbrooke
It's,
for the remainder of the war? Did that...
Not the remainder of the war, we were released eventually. Finally they decided that these people don't look all that dangerous. So there was some more Jewish organization again, which tried to get jobs for people. When they had a job, you were released from the camp. Eventually I got a job in a electronic manufacturing place in Montreal. And that's where I started.
So, and you and Eric moved to Montreal
Then we
the
moved
same
to
time?
Eric came a few weeks later, and he also had a job as a bookkeeper. And then we stayed in Montreal.
Montreal. Had you kept in touch with any of your relatives from home? Like, I know you lost touch with your mom, but any of your uncles or any of the other family members? Had they all kind of gone their own?
There was nobody left.
There was nobody. There was Eva, though. Like, there were other people.
Eva, I didn't know.
You didn't know her.
I met Eva in England when we went back, March and I.
But didn't one of the other, what about Kurt though? Kurt Hanslow?
Yeah, we know.
Had you kept in touch with him, or you
Yeah,
knew that he,
we knew where he was.
and my mom, did you know where she was?
Yeah.
You did? And and you kept in touch by letters? Is that how?
The letters.
Yeah. Was there not an uncle that survived as well?
Yes, there was. But we only met him after the war again.
Was that Hugo? Which uncle?
Ernst.
Ernst. The one who was married to the Catholic
Yeah.
woman, right?
That's right. And Kurt's father.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was way after the war. Because don't forget, they didn't have a permanent address.
They just moved around a lot.
They just moved on.
Was that Pauli he was
Pauli,
married
yeah,
to?
yeah.
Oh, okay. And they ended up moving to the States. Or no, they never
No,
did.
Never did. Because he couldn't take it. He had a heart condition. And when he went to the States, he got sick and had to take him back to Austria.
Oh, he actually did plan on living in the States.
No, they didn't plan on living in the States, but he couldn't even, he was very sick when he was in the States.
So they,
In Boston.
really?
Kurt was in Boston at the time.
So they actually stayed in touch with Kurt. Like they found, they
Yeah.
knew where he was. And
Well, they had an idea where Kurt was. Because, don't forget, Kurt was converted to Catholicism.
when he was adopted by that family.
Even I think before.
Before that.
To
Oh,
save him from,
right.
but it wouldn't have
It didn't
saved him.
matter
It
anyway.
didn't matter anyway in the end.
How did that actually help Ernst then? Because he wouldn't have been considered Catholic.
Who?
Ernst. Like, how did he get?
Ernst was Jewish.
Yeah, so how did he survive?
The Germans were a little bit more lenient to intermarriage.
They were?
If a spouse was not Jewish, the Roman Catholic Church had an influence of that these people should be sort of kept it a little bit better, not interned and not this. But it wasn't a nice life. You could still be interned, but it was a little bit easier in intermarriage.
Were they living in Austria though? Did they stay in
Yeah.
Austria throughout the war?
That's
They
right,
did, eh?
in Vienna all the time.
Because Pauli was there a big age difference between them, or was she? Because she lived on for a long time.
Yeah,
So was she much younger than Ernst, or did she?
I really don't know. Just some people live longer than others, I guess.
Well, she, to me, I mean, I met her a few times.
Yeah.
She must have lived on through her 80s,
90s.
90s maybe, yeah. So you settled into Montreal, and did that feel like the right place to be?
Well, what do you compare it to?
What did you think then about?
You make the best you can, and with the situation at hand.
Must have seemed like a really different world, though. I mean, compared to what you'd come from. Just the whole.
Well, you know, there was so much upheaval that a little bit less, more. It looked pretty good compared to what you came from.
Yeah, so you didn't have a lot of homesickness for what you'd left behind.
Well, homesickness, yes and no. I mean, you missed your mother, your grandmother, and what you had, but the circumstances when you left were such that there was no, I love Austria,
No.
and this was all gone. And it's gone to this day.
Yeah, it's never come back to.
Uh,
Well, look at this.
I
Just
can't understand the people, the house and in Austria we did this. It's nonsense.
yeah. Well, the Jews, Hitler basically succeeded in driving
Yeah.
out the Jews.
Yeah, it was, even today, like that lady who came from us, there was a pension and so on.
Oh yeah,
She said, there are many Jews in Austria today in Vienna,
there aren't.
but
Oh, there are?
there are quite a few, but they're not Austrians. They're from Poland, from Romania, from all over the place.
Not
There are
born
very
there.
few Austrians.
Yeah.
But there are Jews, but not the Jews we knew.
Well, did you know people who went back? Like that tried to go back and tried to find their lives again there?
I personally did not, don't know any. I've heard about some which went back. But,
Did they stay or did they come back again?
well, some stayed, but they usually had properties there and they had a much better life there than here. But normally, most people never went back.
No.
It was just too much bad memory.
Well, people who went back invariably didn't find anything of what their previous life had been.
Well, if you had buildings which still were standing, you could reclaim them.
Yeah.
And I know a fellow in Montreal, actually, used to be a friend of ours. His father, they didn't live in Vienna, they lived close to Vienna in a small city. They had a movie theater, they had his father was a doctor, and he was quite wealthy. Now he got it all back,
He did.
but he didn't go back. He just keeps the income of the thing.
He just sold all the...
He sold part of it and he kept the movie hall and to get some money from it. But he would never think of going back.
Well, how could you ever trust them again, really? Like,
That's
why
right,
would you
so-
want to even take a chance?
And actually this fellow is not even, he's only half Jewish.
Oh, really?
His father was Jewish, his mother was.
So that might have helped him.
But he never,
No. Well, at that point, you must have started to feel pretty Canadian.
yeah, very well. It's,
Did...
I don't get too excited about Canadian, British. That's sort of a narrowing.
Well, did you continue to speak German in Canada? Like, did
No,
you
no.
stopped, eh?
No.
You
We
did,
tried
even
not-
with you and Eric, you didn't speak German to
No.
each other.
We tried not to.
Yeah. Must have been hard, that.
Well, you use German words sometimes if you don't know the English, but eventually it evens out. But there was no sense of, it was more important to learn English, to speak English than German.
Yeah.
And don't forget, German on the street wasn't that popular at that time.
I can imagine not. Well, did...
It's not like the Chinese now yell across the street in Chinese, but we didn't. We kept it very quiet.
Did you, you know, when after the war, in the few months and years after the war, when the true knowledge of what happened in Germany and Austria came out, what did you think of that? Like, just knowing that, were you surprised, or you knew that it was that bad?
We knew that. We knew shortly after the war that everything was gone.
Yeah. People didn't talk about it much, did they, though?
They did partly, but only. It depends, you know, if you had a reason to talk about it, you did. But it was, what can you say? I mean, you can only say, I lost so many relatives and there was nothing much you could do, so
Yeah,
the best thing is to
move on.
keep it to yourself and move on.
Did it, I know you got on with your life and you know, you worked and everything happened for you, but that still must have been something that you thought about, like that stayed with you. You know, that you lost your whole life was gone.
Well, it changed your whole life.
Yeah.
Your whole, I don't know how I would have made out in Austria. I mean, I suppose I would have made out okay because I could have worked in Austria and then I worked here. But you don't, it's sort of all things you really don't know. That's it's no use thinking about what if, this is never ending.
Yeah.
There are too many ifs.
Did you,
Basically, your life was completely changed. A big part was ruined. That you had no family,
no past, like all the people who knew the past.
Yeah, well, if somebody says, if you go to the doctor and says, "Does anybody in your family have
History of
stiff
this
upper lip?"
disease.
I don't know. I never asked for their medical record. And I was there, at that age we didn't talk about those things.
Did
so
you have,
this is-
you have photos though, and you got out with things like that, eh?
Yeah, I have some photos and I
Yeah.
lost some too on the way. But
You didn't really leave with very much, like you didn't,
we were
nothing.
only allowed a very limited amount of stuff to take. You, you couldn't, you only had one suitcase. That big. And that was it.
Well, I guess just like what my mom took
And
from
$10,
Austria.
10 shillings.
That was it, eh? That wouldn't take you far.
No, that wasn't a great deal of money.
Were you quite impressed with just the standard of living in Canada and the easy availability of work? Did that,
Well, it was wartime, so that whole thing was still not really true a reflection of what Canada is. I mean, everybody was busy. Everybody had work because there was so much work to be done in wartime that if you wanted to work, there was no reason why you couldn't find it. And it was easy to get a job.
and
Just,
make
we
okay
needed
money?
somebody to make the connection for us to get out, because we couldn't go there and say,
Hire me.
hire me there, this. But at the moment this was arranged, and it was no problem to find whatever your line was.
There was lots available.
I mean, some people had more problems, elderly people particularly. Like I was very friendly with a guy who had a doctor of law in Vienna. He was fairly rich in Vienna, but he couldn't get his money out. Eventually he lost. He was an elderly man by that time. He had a
Yeah.
harder time. He went as a salesman somewhere.
Yeah.
But
If you were young,
this
there
is-
was.
This is a come down, and yet he didn't go back either.
He didn't, eh?
In his case, I would have understood if he goes back because he has a law degree. And he had clients who asked him to come back.
Really?
And he never considered.
He didn't want to
going.
go back. I would have thought going back would be really painful. Like just
Yeah.
you'd be reminded every day of what
That's
you
right.
lost.
How many? Everybody you see, did he kill somebody or did he? It would be very not a pleasant life.
Yeah. I want to bring your better half in now. Can I do that?
So watch. To look at a concentration camp.
Well, forget that.
Well, I think people, it's taken all these many years for even there to be an awareness of what people went through. Because for a long time, even concentration camp survivors came to Canada or came to the United States and didn't talk about
Yeah.
what they went
Well-
through.
Yeah, I took a fellow like Wiesel who really wrote about it and made it what it really was,
Yeah.
drew attention to it.
It's kind of sad though that, you know, the legacy of, and the memories and like
Yeah, but
looking at the world we live in now, Kurt, there's a lot of people who need to know.
yeah, but I don't think this will ever repeat itself. I hope not. But there's one thing about anti-Semitism that people understand, but to have this engineering skill of developing gas chambers and all this paraphernalia, that takes a government.
A very organized government.
Yeah, that's not something which an individual can do.
No.
I mean, you can not talk to a Jew, so insult him or even hit him if you want, but you can't do this mass murder
No.
on this scale.
No.
It's not that easy to kill 6 million people. Don't forget they didn't kill 6 million, they must probably kill 10, 12 million. 6 million
We're Jews, but
but there were many others in concentration camp too.
yeah.
So
No, they did a very good killing job of
it was,
quite a very well executed plan.
yeah, I mean the Khmer Rouge was probably the only closest thing which,
The numbers of people.
yeah.
So I want to draw this other person into the story
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
and talk about maybe how you met and
Oh.
what were your impressions of this funny guy. I'm sure he told a few jokes.
Well, no, I think
You worked together,
that's
right?
right. He was my boss. And we tried to keep it very quiet.
What was your office? Like, what was
We
your...
weren't in office, we was in a factory,
Oh, what was the company?
Fleetwood.
Oh, okay. The people who make stereos?
Mhm.
Oh, because you were doing radio work, right?
And after it, we decided we couldn't work together anymore because it was too obvious. So I left.
So I
You left first? You left
I
first.
see.
That's right. He left and joined RCA. Then I left and I joined Kellogg Construction Company,
Oh.
which built the Petrofina refinery in Montreal. And then I left there and I worked for Sandoz Pharmaceuticals.
But what did Kurt ask you on a date or did you ask him?
He asked me, he wanted to take me to a hockey game, not knowing I don't like hockey, I don't know anything about it.
Did you like hockey?
No.
He thought,
Oh, we thought all Canadian girls like
Canadian
hockey.
must like hockey,
then he couldn't get tickets, so we went to a movie.
which was a better idea.
Yeah.
Do you remember what the movie was?
No,
No.
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 What year was that? Do you remember what year you met?
Oh, I didn't
How long did you date before you got married?
know.
Forever.
9 years?
9 years? No way.
No, what happened, well, the truth of the matter was that we did go out for a few years, and I think I was 19 when we first went out. And we went together for a few years, and it was quietly suggested to Kurt, can I say it?
Yeah.
That his parents would be very upset if they would know he was marrying somebody who was not Jewish. So thankfully to somebody of his relatives, we broke up for 4 or 5 years.
Oh, for that long, eh? Wasn't just a few months.
No. Then we did get back together. That's why it took 9 years.
Did you like Kurt right away?
I thought he was funny.
Did you know where he came from? Like, what did you think of his story? Did you find out his story right away?
Well, don't forget, we worked with Fleetwood, so there were quite a few everybody was Jewish there except the girls who worked in the factory. And so there was talk.
Why were there a lot of Jews working at Fleetwood?
How come
Well, because the boss was Jewish and
he,
well, only Jews, but he
He hired a lot
he
of
hired
Jews.
a lot.
So were there actually a lot of Austrians working there? People
No,
like you?
no.
Oh no, so Jews
Two.
from Montreal?
yeah,
Yeah, 2 Austrians.
who was the other one?
Drucker.
Oh, Drucker, right, right. And so then that's it, we met there and then,
Did Kurt tell you his story, or did you ask him?
No,
You knew
we-
he didn't come from Canada.
that's right. We didn't talk much about it in the beginning, we just accepted it and went along. The differences in everything,
You were very different in your
Everything.
backgrounds.
everything.
Did you bring Kurt home to meet your mom?
Oh, yeah, we used to come home a lot.
Yeah.
What, in those days you couldn't go on a lot of dates, or did you just, how did you,
Well, in the beginning, did you have a car? In the beginning? No, so we used to meet, and then eventually he got a car. Once he had a car, it was fine.
oh, you could drive around.
Then he could, yeah. But until then, it was, we would meet, and then he would bring me home, and the poor guy had to travel all the way back home.
Oh, was that far, did you live far apart?
Yeah,
Yeah, fairly.
fairly far, yeah.
So you must have felt like this was somebody totally different from anyone you would have ever gone out with in your previous
Yeah,
life.
he was old.
He thought,
You thought, what did you say?
he thought I was awesome.
What was your impression, Kurt?
Well, obviously favorable.
No, it is,
Did you speak French? You spoke French?
Much.
not to him.
Not to him.
No. But, no, I guess it was just a typical going out.
But here you were dating a man totally out of the world you came from.
That's right.
Jewish, everything,
Everything
different.
No, everybody figured this is
She's nuts.
not, yeah, it's
Not
not gonna
going to
last.
work.
No, it's not gonna work. It won't last. But, I guess after we got back together after 4 or 5 years, they figured it will, because there's nothing we can do now.
Did you, who instigated the getting back together?
Don't remember.
I think it was my sister. He bumped into Joan.
Yeah.
He bumped into my sister, I think, at Windsor Station.
Yeah,
She
I
said
remember.
something to him,
Yeah.
and then I think he phoned me.
Yeah.
Were you surprised to hear from him after all that time? Were you dating other people?
Yes, I had met somebody else, and I got engaged and broke the engagement.
See, it's good I do these interviews.
Yeah.
You broke the engagement when Kurt called you up.
No, I broke it before. I figured I can't tolerate this little country bumpkin.
Oh, even before Kurt came
Yeah,
back into
he
your
came
life.
back. I figured there's no way. I guess I was used to going out with him, and I figured this was just not going to work.
When you had been with Kurt in the first time, had you talked about getting married, or that really wasn't?
Well, no, we hadn't talked about getting married, but I do remember when he came to visit me on my 21st birthday, he brought me a present from Burke's. And I looked at it and I thought, that's a big box for an engagement ring, which it wasn't.
A little bit of disappointment?
Yeah. I thought,
But she got over it.
I guess.
Well, Kurt, what did you think in general of Canadian women? Like, were they a strange breed from what you'd met?
I don't think there's so much difference between Canadian and any other.
Yeah, I don't know what you did during the years we weren't going out.
Oh, I guess I went out a few times.
Well, you must have worked a lot. Like, you must have been pretty busy. Did you have more than one job, Kurt, or you worked the one job?
I worked on one job. But it was pretty long hours.
You were living with Eric and Barbara then, right?
Uh,
Or did you live on your own then?
no, that wasn't my own.
You were on your own. Was it a good life for a man as a bachelor then?
Wasn't a bad life. But I worked a lot, long hours,
Yeah,
so,
not much time to think about women.
you know, it's,
Mm.
where was it, RCA, so I looked after a lot of people, I had a lot of paperwork and a lot of,
You were busy.
some technical, some paperwork, all sorts of things.
So when you actually got back together, you sort of knew it was going to be permanent.
Yeah, it's, I guess,
I don't know, we just started going every day, all the time.
Did it bother you that you knew Kurt didn't have much family? That, here you were. You came from a fairly large family.
But, well,
How did you feel about that?
I never thought about it that much, I guess because I had so many people around me all the time and never questioned the fact. I mean, I knew by then the story, but, there's one of these things, nothing you can do.
well, I came from a reasonable large family, I mean, there's 3 kids.
Yeah, but,
Right.
And so it wasn't like Kurt Hansel where there was only one child.
Yeah, you had 3 and
We had 3,
but you also had lots of uncles and aunts and
yeah,
cousins.
lots of,
So that,
Yeah. And you knew Eric too then.
yeah,
Yeah. So you ended up together.
yeah.
yeah, that's it.
All because of
And he's continued to be a slightly strange but funny guy.
Odd.
But the thing is, would we have gotten married if you wouldn't have got that free?
I guess so.
He won a ticket, no, what did you, to go to
Bermuda.
Bermuda. And we were going out and he came, he said, I've got this thing, what it was, a ticket or whatever to go to Bermuda. And I said, oh, win another one and we can get married. And
So I took her up on it.
so he won another ticket.
Oh, that was what led to the wedding.
Yeah.
At
yeah.
this point,
Like this.
I guess.
But
What year was that?
56.
56.
So then we had to hurry because we had to use it up by the end of December. This was some type,
Oh, and that's why you got married December 22.
yeah.
Yeah.
We got married on December 20th because we had to get, had to be completed by the end of the year, so it was a mad